Hello, today is Friday, March 28th. Welcome to episode 432 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you up to speed quickly 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Morgan Vigna, and I'm joined today by Deputy Executive Director Martha Miller, Fellow Jessica Jones, and Advisory Board Member Les Munson. So today we are talking about Congresswoman Elise Stefanik's nomination to the U.S. Permanent Representative to the United Nations and its subsequent withdrawal. So yesterday, the White House drew the nomination of President Trump's, arguably one of his most loyal and ardent supporters. Congresswoman Stefanik had been nominated very early on in the Trump administration to be U.S. UN Perm Rep and at a cabinet level. And so she's arguably one of the most qualified nominees to have been nominated. And now she has been asked to step aside and remain in the House to ensure that the House's margin of majority is maintained. Congresswoman Stefanik currently sits on the House Armed Services Committee and House Intel Committee. So right now it's pretty unclear as to what her trajectory is going to be, although Speaker Johnson did say she would be welcomed back into leadership, but it's yet to be seen what that actually looks like. Clearly, there are a lot of implications for U.S. representation, diplomatic representation at the United Nations, as well as in the sort of multilateral community. So here with us today is our normal crowd. Martha, I'm going to kick it off to you. Les gets to go last because he has some hot takes.
Well, what would you like me to say?
Okay, well, Martha, talk to us about what this means for U.S. representation in the multilateral community. I mean, are we just going to cede the table to China and to Russia and all of the baddies up in New York?
Well, I mean, look, we've already, I think had some interesting votes at the United Nations. Most recently, where we, didn't really vote in the right way, I think, according to a lot of Americans, and with regard to the anniversary of Russia's invasion and reinvasion of Ukraine. And, Elise would have been actually a very strong leader in this role. So it's very unfortunate. I think, I will say I was a little surprised, having worked in presidential personnel, I was a little surprised that I think she was already making some moves that indicated some presumption of Senate confirmation. So that's unfortunate, I think in the big picture for her. And probably adds to the sting of what occurred. I think the question is, we've already pulled out of the World Health Assembly. We've already pulled out of, the Human Rights Commission. And, when we pull out of these organizations, we are losing a voice. And that is not to our advantage, even if we don't like how things have been run. I think the better solution is to grab the bull by the horns and actually shape it the way you want it to be. I think Elise could have done that. But I think the situation that the administration and Republicans generally are grappling with is, frankly, losing general support for their policies. And that's reflected in the special elections that are occurring. And I think we're seeing, that maybe the mandate that the Trump administration has claimed is not quite as strong as they felt it was.
Yeah. So Martha, before I go to Jess, I'm going to identify a fault line here. Mm-hmm. I'm actually going to vehemently support the Trump administration's withdrawal from the UN Human Rights Council. The Trump administration did this in its first term, and now it's doing it again. The UN Human Rights Council is one of the most blatantly anti-Semitic organizations within the UN system, and it actually placates frankly, a lot of autocrats, namely Russia, China, Cuba, again, all of the baddies.
Well, look, I would agree with you on that in the sense that like it is ridiculous, and the very existence of these countries on that commission undermines its whole premise.
Yeah, and I think U.S.'s participation actually legitimizes it. So anyway, I would also note that this administration is something that US-UN is actually charged with, is taking a really close look at a review of all of U.S. participation in all of these international organizations, and actually taking a very methodical approach to determine whether or not U.S. membership is warranted. This is actually something that I actually looked at when I was on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. But the fact is that it is the White House. It is political leadership here that needs to be able to take a very firm look at the value that these organizations provide to U.S. national interests. So I applaud the administration for doing that. I think Elise would have been, a fantastic leader in moving that ball forward. So it's unclear now as to how that is actually going to shake out. So I think that her not being there and being able to see this process through is going to be a potential problem or an barrier to progress, quite frankly. So Jess, turning to you, how do you see this? What does this mean for Congress? What does this mean for Elise's next steps here in Washington?
I can't wait to hear Les's explosive news, because I think there's, I agree with a lot of what Martha said. You pointed out, Morgan, she was one of Trump's first cabinet nominees. She sat in cabinet meetings during the State of the Union. She sat not with with House members. She sat with the cabinet. She has been waiting for the step up. If you look at her Instagram, she's been posting for days her farewell tour, very, very, very much so into the very last minute. So this was obviously news to her as well. I'm sure very unwelcome news. She has spent many years, building up her credibility within the party with President Trump, and she was ready to take the world stage, right? And so, returning to the House. She can, Johnson can talk about House leadership, but her position is gone. It's filled. So, what she's going to do there is left to be seen. And, President Trump was really clear in his, I guess, is it Truth Social? I don't even know. It's Truth Social, his post about it being about, razor thin margins in the House. Like he was very upfront of why he was asking her to remain in the House and pulling her nomination. They're worried about their mandate. There's been special elections that have been surprising to them. Folks are talking about Waltz's district, which is strongly Republican, perhaps being a toss up. They're worried obviously about Stefanik's replacement up in New York, and so they've got reconciliation. They've got things they want to move on, and they're worried they're not going to have the votes for it. So to Martha's point, the mandate that we keep hearing about doesn't seem to be as quite the mandate that Trump has been harping on. And to your point, both you, Morgan, and Martha, about who is going to replace Stefanik at the UN. This isn't a smaller a smaller organization within the UN body, right? The UN system. This is in fact like the main world stage. Who is going to have that kind of backing from the administration, that kind of support and credibility to be a representative of the United States? It'll be. I wait to see who is going to be named as her replacement.
Mm-hmm. All right, Les, dear listeners, brace yourselves. Les, incoming. Give it to us. What's your hot take?
Well, the real story here is corruption among New York Democrats. The governor of the state of New York, Kathy Hochul, and Democrats in the state assembly were willing to delay the election to replace Elise Stefanik until late this year, or perhaps even beyond, thus denying the people in her upstate district the opportunity to have representation in Congress merely for partisan political advantage. And when the numbers are so close, this kind of stuff matters. And so this inherent political corruption of Democrats in the state of New York is the real driver of this decision at the end of the day. Now, you could fault the Trump administration for putting itself in the position of having to worry about this. That's fair. But I think we're being incredibly remiss if we are not talking about the fact that Democrats are willing to manipulate the democratic representation system of our country for their own partisan political advantage in a way that is very bad for the people of upstate New York. And this is the kind of thing that produces enormous cynicism about our democracy and makes it kind of a balanced field for Trump, who certainly has his own challenges in that regard, between the two parties. So the Democrats, which like to pontificate and pose as the holy kings of the order of democratic representation, are actually the worst practitioners of it. And this is a perfect example, because it's the devil is in the details here. And this is all about when a replacement for Stefanik could be elected to go to Congress. And Democrats were going to delay that as much as they plausibly could while passing a new law in the state of New York to facilitate that. So let's just make sure that we're talking about the thing that really drove this decision, which is corruption in Albany, New York.
All right. On that note, that is a wrap. Thanks so much to Kelly Crowley, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for producing today's Fun Friday episode. Join us on Monday, March 31st, for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart, fast on national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. Fault Lines is now on YouTube, so check out our channel for a video of today's episode. And you might notice that Les's new office is slowly coming together. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.